Sudden.
And the water swept my truck down the road.
Unstoppable.
It changed the entire landscape.
Deadly.
It's just horrific.
Like fast-flowing concrete, mudslides can wipe out everything in their paths.
The whole forest was gone.
Yet the total impact from mudslides and landslides can increase biodiversity and unearth prehistoric treasures. Hurricanes, tsunamis, earthquakes.
This was the deadliest tornado on record.
The impact can be devastating.
God completely wiped it off the map.
We step inside the disaster.
We were running for our lives.
It hits like a freight train.
And unravel the unexpected and sometimes jaw-dropping total impact.
Believe it or not, some good can come from these monster storms.
Between 2004 and 2016, more than 50,000 people were killed by landslides around the world. Surprisingly, this ferocious phenomenon often begins like this. A fire ignites in a picturesque park in Southern California.
The Thomas Fire started in December. It was started by power lines that came down and the sparks ignited in the brush. We had wind gusts up to 70 miles an hour that night. And with winds blowing that strong, there's a very small window of opportunity when you can stop something like that.
The fire will set off a chain of events that will end in one of the most devastating mudslides in California's history. Montecito, a picturesque community nestled between the ocean and the foothills of the Santa Ynez Mountains.
Montecito is beautiful naturally, but it is actually the community here that is so amazing and so special.
But like many communities in California, Montecito's year-round sunshine means long, dry summers that transform the surrounding vegetation into the perfect fuel for fire.
Everybody loves the weather, but that also makes for a hazardous area too in terms of fire. We have these long, dry summers, brings on fires.
The Thomas fires explode in size. More than 1,000 firefighters work to contain the threat. Residents receive mandatory evacuation orders, including Lalo and his partner Peter.
The Thomas Fire moved here fairly quickly, and as it became clear that we needed to evacuate, they gave us 72 hours to leave the property.
Search and rescue!
So we loaded up all of our belongings that we thought were valuable, and we left. And it took us about a week or more to finally get the orders of coming back in and allowed to come back into the property.
From start to finish, the Thomas Fire burned over 273,000 acres. There were 2 fatalities directly related to the Thomas Fire.
Many have only just returned to their homes when warnings are issued about incoming rain and the possibility of flooding and mudslides, also known as debris flows.
But debris flow is usually caused after a fire because the fire burns the vegetation and now the slopes are bare. When it rains hard, then that water comes down those slopes which aren't protected, and now the water can mix in with all this sediment and create a cement-like slurry. And it can pick up rocks, it can float these boulders. 12 inches of water can float a 6-foot boulder. And so as that moves down, it's this grinding machine that just digs out the channels right down to the bedrock.
But while residents are urged to evacuate again, many are suffering from warning fatigue.
We were on the tail end of numerous back-to-back red flag warnings. We were kind of in a red flag warning fatigue because we'd been telling our resources every day, it's a red flag warning, so be on high alert. So you kind of go to that place in your mind, unfortunately, like, well, today's gonna be another day where nothing happens.
It came up to the point of the new worry of this rain coming, and we were told that we were in the voluntary evacuation zone, but we were so exhausted at that point. Peter just thought, you know what, we'll point the vehicles so that they're pointing outwards. If something does come to that nature, we'll just head out. That evening, Peter said, I'm aware that this could be a problem. I'm not going to sleep. I'm going to stay awake and monitor the creek. I was scheduled to work the next morning, so I went to bed, not thinking too much about it.
We knew that we would probably see some localized flooding. So that day we were filling sandbags and cleaning out culverts and looking at creeks and kind of preparing for a big rainstorm.
But no one is prepared for what's to come.
No one knew that that giant storm was going to park over Montecito Mountain and just dump. No one knew. No one had any idea.
Maeve is on patrol when the downpour hits.
I was parked on what used to be called the San Ysidro Bridge. It had just started to rain, and it started to get heavier and heavier and heavier, and it turned into this kind of extreme rainfall downpour. And to be honest, I got excited with the rainfall, and so I remember sitting in the truck thinking, this is great. You know, this is exactly what we need, and this is gonna bring an end to fire season.
It rained a ½ inch in 5 minutes, and that's equivalent to 6 inches per hour. That's a phenomenal amount of rain. It's just like grabbing a bucket of water and just throwing it, just chucking it onto the hillside. Really, that's what set things off.
The geography of Montecito makes it particularly vulnerable to fire, rain, and debris flows.
Montecito is in a hazard zone in a lot of ways. The formation of the San Ynez Mountains behind us and the fact that these steep canyons run right down into town.
The canyons provide natural pathways for flowing water. The formations remaining after these events are known as debris fans.
Montecito was built on a whole series of debris fans that come out of the mountains here. The canyons are stacked next to each other, and they're very steep, and as that sediment comes out, each one forms a debris fan, and they overlap. And this overlapping debris fan has made this even slope that goes down to the ocean, and that is what Montecito is built on.
If the impact is anything like the 1938 Los Angeles mudslides, it could be catastrophic. The event killed 115 people, destroyed dozens of homes, and buried people alive. It's one of the worst disasters in California's history. In Montecito, it only takes minutes after the rains begin for the creek beds to fill and overflow. Two rare events come together, and then the unthinkable happens.
So within minutes, the debris flow occurred. Literally within minutes of the rainstorm. So it was a rainstorm that occurs probably every 100 or every 200 years. That came after a fire that occurs every 20 to 40 years.
As the deluge of rain hits the hillside, Maeve decides to patrol the area.
So I drove off the bridge, and I took probably about 60 to 65 seconds before the sky just turned orange. I don't know how to describe it other than a massive ball of glowing orange. I wasn't sure what was happening because it was the middle of the night, and so I slammed on my brakes.
A natural gas pipeline is severed. The massive explosion lights up the night sky. But before Maeve can figure out what it is, she sees something else, more terrifying.
And as I looked to my side, I could see a glob of debris coming down. So it was water and tree trunks and boulders coming down the road at me.
Maeve's truck is hit full force by a deadly mudslide.
I didn't really have time to really decide on anything, and so I put it back in drive, and that's when the water swept my truck down the road.
Following the devastating Thomas fires, a 1-in-100-year rainstorm hits Montecito. Within minutes, the hillsides and everything on them are swept away in mudslides. Residents in the city below aren't aware that it's too late to evacuate.
A debris flow can be very destructive as it moves down through these steep canyons. It moves fast, it's sudden, it's got a front that's about 30 feet high. There's no warning about it except that it's been raining. And it's filled with boulders and large full-size trees. It tangles up on bridges and it finds new paths. And these large boulders, when they crash into houses, it instantly obliterates them. It really hits like a freight train.
Lalo is sleeping while his partner Peter keeps watch out the window. Suddenly, Lalo is wrenched awake.
My phone was giving the alert sound. I was so confused and disoriented. I felt like there was independent boulders shifting underneath the house. And as I started to realize the potential of what was happening, I looked over towards the creek and I could see huge 200-foot trees snapping down like twigs. I told Peter, I said, let's get the hell out of here. I tried to run as fast as I could to the front door where I always kept my keys. I was this close to actually grabbing my keys when the front door burst open and mud and water and everything started to flow into the house.
As Lalo's house is struck by the full force of the mudslide, Maeve's truck is swept away, with Maeve inside. She has only a split second to make a life or death decision.
I knew in that moment that I was gonna have to make a quick decision to try to get out of the blob. I knew that there was a driveway coming up on my left, and so as that driveway came up, I kind of prepared myself and turned the steering wheel as hard as I could in hopes that I could get out of the blob.
If she can't steer her truck out of the mudslide, she could be buried, crushed, or suffocated in the debris. But Maeve is lucky.
I successfully got my truck out of the blob and into a driveway. Immediately got out of the vehicle and turned around to kind of see what had happened behind me. And it no longer looked like what it had just a few minutes prior. There were power lines down, there were boulders, there were vehicles stuck everywhere. There was just stuff everywhere.
Mountainous areas around the world are vulnerable to mudslides and landslides. When drought and fire are added to the mix, the risks are even greater.
When a wildland fire comes through, like the Thomas fire, it just completely scorches the vegetation in the hillsides. It kills the seed beds, it kills the plants. It doesn't allow the earth time to kind of regenerate and heal and repair itself.
A wildfire removes the vegetation and produce a lot of ash. The ash can infiltrate the soil and make it almost impermeable to water. And then the plants themselves release a waxy substance that can seal the surface.
As rain falls, it can't penetrate the waxy, ashy layer.
So when it rains, it just quickly runs off, and the runoff can be up to 10 times more than would normally be produced without a fire. It can move boulders up to the size of buses. The weight of the boulders is pretty close to the weight of the fluid that's moving them. So they kind of bob along like ping pong balls along a stream. And there's no limit on the size of the boulder that can be transported.
Within minutes, multiple mudslides are barreling through Montecito, destroying everything in their paths.
It almost was like a scene from a horror movie. People were covered from head to toe in mud, and people were confused and they were cold. People were crying, people were yelling, and I realized that not as many people evacuated as we thought had.
Downhill from Maeve, for those who haven't already evacuated, it's too late to flee.
I ran back to where Peter was. He was in the bathroom. He told me immediately, jump onto the vanity. And I started to shake, and I was like, Peter, Peter, Peter. And he tried to calm me down and just said, if we need to, we'll get higher. If we need to get to the roof, we'll do that. And it was moments after that, I saw our two vehicles float past the window, and I knew something bad's gonna happen. The house actually started to lift off its foundation. It did like a little waft, a second waft, and the third waft, the house just lifted off its foundation and launched us out into the flow of mud and water. It was a miracle that I didn't die in that moment.
The people who didn't evacuate didn't know it was coming, and when it was coming, it was probably too late. People reported the boulder front is coming down and lines of trees falling down like a mass of elephants behind pushing down the trees through a forest. And it makes a big noise. Debris flows move, they probably sound like a freight train going by. You can hear it coming, you can see it coming.
As the mud flow hits their home, Lalo and Peter are swept away into a torrent of mud, trees, and boulders.
I went into survival mode. Instead of trying to resist, I went with the flow. And Peter yelled at me at that point and said, Lalo, grab onto some wood and you don't let go. I looked over my left shoulder. I saw Peter for the last time.
As Lalo desperately searches for something to grab onto, Maeve jumps from survivor to rescuer.
I had asked my two firemen to start knocking on doors. They found a couple whose house was closest to the gas explosion. Their house had caught on fire, and they jumped out of the window to escape. And when the wife jumped out, she broke both of her feet. It was still pouring rain, it was dark, there was still a ton of confusion. The only light that we had was from the glow of the fire down the street.
Maeve calls for an ambulance, but she's told they can't get to her.
And I remember being incredibly frustrated, thinking, why can't anyone access us? I don't understand why they can't get in here. So I said, fine, then I'll drive them to you. As we came down the street, I got a glimpse of what was happening, and the entire community that I was used to driving through had washed away. Everything was gone, and there were just power lines and boulders and pieces of homes and roofs in the street.
It felt like an alien landscape. You didn't know where the road even was anymore. It was just such a surreal, shocking, visceral feeling. I just couldn't process it at all. It was too big. It was just too big.
Further downhill, Lalo and Peter have been ripped from their home. As Lalo loses sight of Peter, he fights to stay alive.
I was going probably about 25, 30 miles an hour at that moment. So when I hit the tree, I grabbed it from its side, but my head still hit the tree pretty hard. But I hung on to the tree and I started to try and figure out what my next move was going to be. I started to notice the amount of boulders, rocks, cars, trucks, everything was coming down the creek, and I just felt like something was going to snap me in half. I just had that terrifying feeling in my spine that I'm here held on this tree, but something's going to smash me up against it. Once the mud flow started to recede a little bit, it became less liquefied and more thick, but I felt it was safe enough to get off the tree.
Lalo has no idea what's happened to Peter. And as the rain continues to pour down, Maeve comes to a stark realization.
There were just 7 of us from the Montecito Fire Department. We kind of started to realize that we were stranded.
Once the mudslides that have overrun Montecito run their course, search and rescue efforts begin. But with roads and entire neighborhoods washed away, there's no easy way for help to arrive. Maeve calls for reinforcements.
Once the Coast Guard came overhead, I landed and I notified them that the female patient that I had couldn't walk. I just put her on my back and I walked her up through the field to the helicopter and handed them both over to the care of the Coast Guard. I kind of felt a little bit of a relief and felt like I could start finding more people and getting more people out of harm's way.
Like many stranded in the wake of the mudslides, Lalo waits for first responders to arrive.
When the ambulance came, I was a little hesitant to leave because I didn't feel like I was in that bad a shape, but the paramedics said that, no, you're suffering hypothermia.
There were just an endless barrage of 911 calls of person not breathing, person trapped.
Our house is filled with mud. I have a newborn.
Drowning, mud in the home, flooding.
I don't know if we're gonna live.
I heard cries for help coming from every direction. It was still dark at this point. The sun was just coming up, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, there's so many people in here.
My reaction when I first saw what was happening was shock, overwhelm, sense of being disconnected from reality, that this couldn't be happening. Mud everywhere, the boulders, the size of small buildings. I just had never seen anything like that. It was like a long, slow, unfolding train wreck where you think you're to the end of it and you discover, no, there was 3 more cars with children in them. By then, the search and recovery effort was well underway for the people who had perished and who were missing.
The injuries and the victims were endless. We got on the loudspeakers and asked everyone to get up to the rooftops if they could. I asked for every available aircraft in the area to come so that we could start pulling people from rooftops and from trees.
First responders insist that Lalo join other survivors being evacuated by military vehicles, but he's hesitant to leave.
I was sure that Peter would be arriving soon. He was just that kind of person that would somehow make it through anything. I remember wanting to stay, but they told me that when Peter would come, that they would, do the right thing, and so they reassured me that I needed to go. As we finally did make it into Santa Barbara, coming through that area, there was people rollerblading, there was people on bikes. It was actually a beautiful day, and I just could not understand the duality of these two things existing at the same time.
Back in the affected area, Maeve starts sending people to a makeshift recovery area at a nearby golf course.
It was so cold. I remember thinking, all these people are soaking wet. We didn't have any power. I started thinking, we don't have any running water. People are gonna get thirsty. I can't feed them. The decision was made to start sending in Black Hawks and just pulling all of the people out. I think we flew out maybe 250 people.
As Lalo recovers, friends and family search for Peter.
It wasn't until the next day the word came in that he was found. They had found his body. I also found out that someone had posted on Facebook that they had found Peter's passport, photos, personal belongings. And once I did actually see his belongings, I knew it was real.
In the wake of the destruction, the impact is devastating. While Lalo will never forget that fateful night, it's the loving memory of Peter that is forever imprinted on him.
Peter was someone that was willing to live his life without any regrets. Peter was a character that I think early on in his own life, he realized that there is no do-overs in this life. He was someone I never would have thought of falling in love with, but he captured my heart, and I will miss him for the rest of my life.
In the aftermath, the community comes together to rebuild.
The cleanup after this debris flow was huge. It just was debris, homes and cars, and boulders and mud everywhere, sometimes 10 feet deep or more. Hundreds of people working around the clock for months on end. And some of the bridges just got open 2 years later. It was very, very difficult.
It was terrible and tragic, but it also had a lot of beauty to it in terms of how the community pulled together. If there is any bit of silver lining coming out of a disaster, that to me is really loving each other through this disaster. We kind of found out the best of us.
I tell the people in my life that I love them more often because I always want the people in my life to know what they mean to me.
While the devastating effects of mudslides and debris flows are undeniable, science is revealing that their total impact can actually create an unexpected boom in wildlife.
I'd call it a hard reset of the biodiversity, but Mother Nature is extremely resilient.
It's 1980, and Mount St. Helens in Washington State is about to unleash the largest landslides ever recorded in Earth's history. The disaster will release multiple types of debris flows. The effects will be both devastating and surprising. It begins with an earthquake rumbling beneath Mount St. Helens, a volcano that's been dormant for over a century. From March to mid-May, a staggering 10,000 earthquakes are recorded in the area. The quakes build pressure beneath the volcano, causing the north side to bulge outward.
One of our students was working up there on the observation site about 9 miles away from the volcano, and they were monitoring the bulge. The whole side just slowly swelled day by day.
Then, a 5.1 magnitude earthquake strikes. Moments later, the north face begins to crumble.
As the mountain moved up and down and was pulsing with the pressures below, it fractured all the rock. And eventually, the mountain couldn't hold itself up anymore on that north side, and simply slid down.
Rock, debris, and ice tumble down the mountain, triggering a landslide.
The whole mountain slipped, and then it fluidized into a debris flow that went down the Toutle River a long ways.
Reaching speeds of 249 kilometers an hour, the landslide rockets 21 kilometers down the river, filling the valley with up to 180 meters of debris. It's the largest landslide in history, covering 62 square kilometers. But the disaster isn't over. With a new opening on the north face, the volcano explodes in a lateral blast, ripping down the mountainside.
You can imagine if an explosion goes sideways rather than up, it's going to knock down trees and destroy things.
The eruption triggers a second type of suffocating debris flow, pyroclastic flows.
Pyroclastic flows are generated from the parts of an erupting volcano that haven't mixed with the atmosphere sufficiently. So those parts that are more dense are going to plunge towards the ground, start flowing down the flanks of the volcano.
The searing heat melts the mountain's ice caps.
There was a lot of moisture from the glaciers up top that were now melting because of the heat.
The water mixes with volcanic ash and debris knocked down by the landslide and blast. The cumulative effect produces a third type of debris flow, concrete-like mud flows called lahars.
Most lahars are near boiling temperature if they're near the volcano and come from very fresh deposits, and they can be traveling at tens of meters a second.
An eruption and three types of debris flows, a landslide of epic proportions, pyroclastic flows, and lahars. The impact is devastating.
It wiped out a whole forest. The whole forest was gone.
St. Helens was extremely destructive to the surrounding environment. It just blew all this sediment and shot it outward, and it knocked down all the trees for hundreds of square miles, covered the lands with ash and very hot gases that burned up. It killed a lot of things.
57 people are killed, along with 7,000 game animals, as well as birds and small mammals. 596 square kilometers of forest are obliterated. An area once full of wildlife is reduced to a wasteland. Yet in a surprising twist, researchers have found that the wreckage caused by debris flows can actually aid in diversifying habitats and increasing biodiversity. Clearing stretches of forest, landslides can create space for fields and meadows and bring with them new species of plants and animals. Pyroclastic flows and lahars can transport nutrient-rich volcanic ash, increasing the fertility of the soil. Around Mount St. Helens, this meant a quick rebound in vegetation.
Fortunately, it happened in the springtime when there was a layer of snow on the ground. The plants and animals that live underneath the snow actually made it okay. They were protected by this layer of snow. We saw sprouting coming up within weeks.
The forest came back remarkably quick, actually, just a few years.
Underwater, debris from landslides can also increase aquatic biodiversity by creating new habitats for both predators and prey.
It was a major reset, changed the entire landscape. Of course, Mount St. Helens looks completely different now. Those changes will be around a long time.
Despite the complete change in landscape, the forest is on its way to being lusher and healthier than prior to the 1980 landslide and eruption.
I'd call it a hard reset of the biodiversity after Mount St. Helens, but Mother Nature is extremely resilient, and it's amazing the regrowth that came afterwards.
While landslides can both destroy and support new life, in some instances, their total impact brings with them a gold rush of treasure seekers and can uncover the prehistoric past.
Landslides are constantly bringing new fossils onto the beach, but it's a double-edged sword because at the same time, the landslides also threaten people and property.
Around the globe, mudslides and landslides are feared for their destruction and death. On the southwest coast of England, the geology of the picturesque village of Lyme Regis makes it prone to landslides. Yet they've had a surprising upside that brings tourists here from around the world.
Landslides in Britain are not common at all. In fact, there are only 1 or 2 hotspots, and the coast around Lyme Regis is really one of them. The reason why the coast around Lyme Regis is so prone to landslides is that the lower part of the cliffs are made of Jurassic rocks, about 200 million years old, and those rocks are impermeable. And then capping the cliffs is a much younger sandstone from the Cretaceous age. That's permeable, which means that the rainwater can soak down to the clay surface, and that allows the cliff top to slide off into the landslide.
The Bindon landslide of 1839 was one of the largest coastal landslides in Europe. Overnight, more than 6 hectares of land and 8 million tons of rock broke away from cliffs and crashed onto the beach and into the sea.
It's not a regular process, it's an erratic process that happens sporadically according to the weather. So the more we have rain and storms, the greater the chance of landslides. And that makes it really hard to predict.
Yet the very geological qualities that make the region prone to catastrophic landslides are also a record of the Earth's past and have given the area the name, the Jurassic Coast.
So Lyme Regis sits on the Jurassic coast. For a 95-mile section of coast, there is nowhere else in the world where it's possible to walk through 185 million years of the Earth's history in a virtually unbroken sequence.
With each landslide that threatens the nearby villages, the fossil remains of the marine life that perished millions of years ago are being uncovered, revealing secrets of prehistoric life.
Lyme Regis is really famous for fossils because the landslides are constantly bringing new fossils onto the beach. They're beautifully preserved. You can see these ammonites preserved with calcite crystal. But we also have the giant marine reptiles, the ichthyosaurs and the plesiosaurs, and they died onto a seabed that was poisonous and stagnant. So we find these beautifully articulated specimens like the ones in the museum. So Mary Anning, obviously one of the most famous fossil collectors of all time, she found her first ichthyosaur in Lyme Regis in 1811 at the age of 11 with her brother Joseph. She didn't find the first ichthyosaur ever found. Before that, people were known as curiemen, and the fossils they sold were curiosities.
Today, amateur and professional fossil hunters from around the world flock to the area after landslides, searching for fossils. From beautifully geometric ammonites to giant plesiosaurs and Scelidosaurus, every year between 20 and 30 of the finds turn out to be of scientific interest.
The landslides are constantly bringing the fossils down to the beach. I found my first fossil here 40 plus years ago, and we're still finding the fossils. It's a fantastic and completely sustainable activity. We also need collectors to be out there collecting, because if they weren't, The new and important finds, which are still being made, they'll just be smashed and lost by the sea.
While the landslides along the Jurassic coast continue to be one of the important sources of Jurassic fossils in the world, the devastation that landslides and mudslides can bring is undeniable. And modern engineering is leveraging physics to help mitigate their deadly effects. The raw power of landslides and mudslides can snap massive trees, toss boulders like pebbles, and level entire neighborhoods. For those living with the threat of these disasters, is there any way to protect themselves?
So the trick then is to figure out, how are you going to defend yourself? And how are you going to make yourself and your entire community a safer place for you to live?
Scientists are inventing new ways of protecting communities prone to landslides. Tim is a geologist and has worked around the world to help mitigate the deadly effects of debris flows of all sorts, from mudslides to avalanches.
Often an event happens, such as a debris flow or rock slide. People say, okay, what can we do to prevent this from happening again? That's when experts come in, geologists, engineers, and they work with companies to figure out what system to provide.
Debris flow barrier systems, sometimes called ring nets, are designed to catch debris before it's too late.
The nets themselves are made from high tensile strength steel, and we loop them in a machine into different spirals for different strength nets. And then we sew them together, essentially to make a grid of rings or a net. They're made from high tensile strength steel, which makes them very strong, and the structure of them makes them very flexible. So we're stopping dynamic hazards by allowing the hazard to slow down as the system deforms.
Whether it's rocks, trees, or snow, the ring nets work by catching debris, stopping the momentum.
It's like big strainers. Debris flows come down the channel and impacts the barrier. The barrier deforms and slows the material down, and then eventually stops it.
Jesus. Listen to that.
The idea for ring nets isn't new. It's based on Swiss avalanche prevention technology that's been around for decades.
Rudimentary systems were started in the 50s using these wire rope nets, wood posts, and they started with avalanche protection. So the snow would accumulate behind these rows of fences and preventing the avalanche from starting. In the 70s, they started developing specific systems for stopping rockfall. In 1998, a rockfall barrier was installed, and a debris flow happened to hit it. It filled this rockfall barrier, and then that's where the idea of using a flexible barrier to stop debris flow happened.
Flexibility is the secret of a ring net's success.
Wherever a system's flexible, it can be lighter weight because it's taking deformation and it's absorbing the load through the flexibility rather than just brute force. Flexibility in geohazard protection systems is important because we're using relatively lightweight materials, yet strong, and we're taking these dynamic, fast-moving hazards and we're slowing them down over distance.
Following the deadly mudslides in Montecito, California in 2018, ring nets have been installed to help prevent future tragedies.
The debris flow nets at Montecito are going to provide, protection from additional mudslides, and it's going to reduce the potential hazard in the future. By no means does it eliminate potential hazard.
Those kinds of infrastructure projects won't save you from everything, but what they do is they do build in a certain sense of security here, and they help you understand that you're going to be able to navigate these things much better in the future. You have to think about the fact that we're living in a climate-hostile world now.
With climate change and development, the rate of landslides occurring worldwide is projected to increase.
Climate change is changing everything in terms of the severity of fire, and rainstorms are definitely getting more intense. So the possibility of loading this wildfire and rainstorm is more likely, which will lead to more severe landslides.
We're not in control, and the environment is going to do what it's going to do. The only thing we can do is be prepared for the next event.
Mudslides, landslides, debris flows. They can destroy everything in their paths and turn deadly in the blink of an eye. Yet their total impact can also increase biodiversity and reveal prehistoric treasures. As the danger looms for those living in their paths and in a world with increasingly unpredictable weather, technology could help mitigate the devastation of the deadly debris flow.